Yes, I have electrical sensitivity. So I have to be careful around this stuff. We're going to take a very deep dive now into children's near-death experiences, especially birth to the age of 5 years. So we're going after the little tiny ones. I want to talk first about research. I want to set the stage here for you because there are two types of researchers, vertical and horizontal. Your vertical researcher uses scientific protocols. They establish the image or the design or the object. They build the bones of whatever it is you're talking about. A horizontal researcher puts meat on the bones. We're looking at the after effects. We're looking at the thorough result of something like this ever having happened to you. We're in your kitchen talking to your family. Whenever possible, we talk to your health caregivers, maybe your neighbors, maybe your best friend, and sometimes doing follow-ups. So we're the original field workers. I'm a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station. I use police investigative techniques as my protocol, which means I'm the gumshoe on the beat. And Dad always said, the body says more than the mouth does. So I'm watching your bodies. I'm watching everything you do and how, when someone walks by, how that might change what you do. So I'm one of those kind of sneaky, spooky persons who's just looking and looking and examining to find out what's going on here. So I want to say, again, or more, that not only is this a horizontal research project, but it's two. It's two all wrapped in one. Back in the 80s and 90s, I did my first research of children's near-death experiences, and the title of that book is The New Children and Near-Death Experiences. It was very, very thorough. In the back, I have a very large resource section. So if you want to know how-tos or what you can do, please get that book. But I found a lot of anomalies in that book. Things that just really challenged what we think we know about near-death experiences. So I went around to everybody I knew, scientific researchers, medical people, and saying, you know, we really need another research project, not just on the near-death experience, but specifically on near-death experiences with children. They're different. They're different. They're not like adult experiences. And I couldn't get a single soul interested. So 3 years ago, I decided, all right, I've had enough. I'm going to do it myself. Oh, well, look, folks, I come from Idaho. We're plain speakers. We just lay it out there. Okay? So if you want the genteel kind, you want somebody else. So I went out and did it myself. Only this time I was looking for older people. In the first study, my research base was birth to the age of 15 years. I had hardly any of the teen or tween crowd come forward. So most of them were from 7 years under, and a large grouping between birth and the age of 15 months and between 3 to 5 years. So really the younger crowd, the ones I wanted. But these were the very young people. I worked a lot with kindergartners. Oh yeah, I did. From kindergarten up into their middle 20s or so. You know, when you're working with kids, your eyes can never be above their eye level, ever. So if they're small, guess where you are? You on the floor. So I'm working with people then who are younger at the time, looking forward in life. This time I went after people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. My oldest, 86. I wanted people who could validate having had an experience between birth and the age of 5 years, and answer my question. Did having an experience this young in life, did it make any difference? You know, in the living of your life, did it make any difference? If it did, tell me about it. So in essence, I was looking for essays. But, you know, I did a lot of follow work with these essays. And I was not prepared for what I found. You're going to hear a lot of surprising stuff today. You know, working with older people, one of the things I found was that maybe just a handful had talked about it before, the rest of them had not. We can go ahead and go to the next one. It's the same experience, it's the same after effects, but it's totally different. And this one fellow, he just retired. He must have been like maybe 66, 67, 68, somewhere in there. And he wrote me back a 50-page essay with photographs of his family interspersed all through. And how grateful he was to finally be able to talk about his experience. He'd never been able to say a word all those 60, 65, 68 years. I had ever so many tear-stained essays. They were so tear-stained I could hardly read them. Of people who were so desperate, so grateful to finally say something. You know, most of your researchers only have a project in a hospital. And, you know, it's a certain type of project, certain type of people in a hospital. Hey, I went after everybody. And I had a number of people say to me, why is it they never research the poor, people in poverty? And they don't. I couldn't tell you why. This one woman saved up her pennies until she could afford a postage stamp to mail me her story. A lot of Native Americans, lots of people. Integration differences. Most adults integrate their experience between 7 to 10 years. Don't believe anybody who said they did it quicker. They're still integrating. With children, it's 20 to 40 years. Adults integrate, children compensate. A child has known before. What are they going to compare it to? You know, it's sort of up a creek. It was so thrilling to me that those that had birth to maybe six months of age, they all called themselves birthers. That was their word. It didn't matter where they were, they called themselves birthers. I don't know why they came up with that name, but they did, so I honor that. I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the people. Well, no, let's go ahead to the next one. You know, rich and poor, all races, all types, all over the world. I had 3 people raised in the voodoo religion, never heard of God, never heard of the Bible, never heard of Christianity, didn't know the word. And all 3 were met by Jesus in their near-death experience. They knew who Jesus was, and they called him by name. Now, where did that come from? I don't know where it came from, but it happened. I had a number of them who were, their parents, the only reason they ever came into the world was so that their parents could have a baby to sacrifice at Satan's altar. And this one, Judy, had 17 near-death experiences before the age of 9. The first one at 6 weeks of age. This woman went through hell. A number of people like Judy. When we think of babies, you know, and our children, and we don't think in terms of the dark side. But it's out there. Let's go to the next one. In the forever angels. We can go to the next one after that. We're looking at the sum of the life experiences. This is what I want. I want the sum of the life experience. Drugs and alcohol, dating, marriage, money, mature years, spiritual awareness, school, career, family, sex, health. Yeah, I want it all. Did it make a difference? Tell me about it. Most childhood near-death experiences, no matter where they are in the world, come from abuse issues, drownings. A lot of them come from drownings. Birth difficulties, high fever, you know, various other types of experiences, but mainly those. But imagine, most of them, and when I say most of them, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about 397 people. This is not a small study. These are good numbers. 397 people. Most have clear memories of being in the womb. Get that? Got any nurses here? Got any medical people here? Most of them have clear memories of being in the womb. Got any mothers here? Woo! We'll get into this a little bit. Memories of other families, other homes, other worlds. Here's something for IANDS. Most of them do not like being around adult experiencers. They do not like IANDS, IANDS conferences, or support groups like this. Why? They don't like people talking about love and light. This is literal. Don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is they think it's silly. What are you talking about love and light? They're interested in how to do things and how to make things and how to learn things. And, you know, they don't want to just sit around talking about love and light. They've already been there. You know, typical kid. They're not interested. And I found that, I found that very interesting. They're not interested in the kind of things most of us are. They think that's boring. No problem with memory. None at all. Even that 86-year-old woman, no problem with memory. And her sister verified, her your near-death experience. Researchers have made consistent findings year after year after year, especially Bruce Grayson, who's done so much work in this area. Consistent findings that memories of NDEs usually remain clear and detailed irrespective of age. If, however, the experience is blocked from the mind, and in some cases it is, when it comes back, it will stay. So if for some reason, as a child, it's blocked, you don't remember it, it can come back, especially reading a book like The Forever Angels. Here's a case, all you mothers out there, especially any of you who smoked. This is Penny. The most profound memory was my mother smoking. Now, she's in the womb. I remember getting excited in utero when she would feel anxious because I knew that the bad taste was coming and soon I would feel high. Doctors tell you that it's okay to smoke, right? Doctors tell you it's all right to have a little bit of alcohol, right? If you're a pregnant mother, guess what?
No.
It affects the baby in the womb, and the baby knows what you're doing, and they know why. Oh, here we have Monica. She has a clear memory of sitting on God's lap, surrounded by angels. I never felt like I fit in. It was as if I had dropped in from another planet. I want to hold there for just a little minute. I may be repeating myself later on, but I want to hold there nonetheless. Most of us here, in fact, I would say all of us here, have suffered from what I call out of the mouth of babes syndrome. I love these stories out of little kids. These innocent stories, they're wonderful. They hold us, they help us, they thrill us. Wonderful stories, out of the mouth of baby stories. I love them too. Who does follow up? Who visits that same child 10 years later? Who visits that same child 21 years later, 30 years later, 43 years later? You're going to get a different story if you do. And that's what we're talking about here. Let's go ahead. Dark light experience. Yes, there are dark light experiences. No, they are not negative. I want to talk a little bit about the lights before I explain this one with star. Children see 3 different lights, clearly. The first one that they talk about is this light that is raw and powerful light. Doesn't have a color, but it's raw and powerful. The second light is the black or dark light. Many times it has purple tinges to it. There's something about this dark black light that is very, very loving and cuddly and kind and healing. Kids love to be in that light. And I ran across a number of adult experiencers also who had dark light experiences. And then there's that bright light. A lot of us call it a white light, but children are specific. It's a bright light. And it can be white, it can be silver, it can be a little gold, but it's very, very bright. And there's something about this light This light knows all about you. You know, you can't kid this light. And you can converse with this light. There's something, you know, very special about this light. And the children have a wonderful way of defining these lights. Well, that bright light, that's father light. That dark light, that's mother light. And that raw, powerful light, that's God's light. And the bright light and the dark light, they come from God's light. The children are very specific about that. So here we have a dark light experience in the womb, pre-utero. And what Star is saying to us is, what I remember pre-utero was a room with black living walls. There were no words exchanged, only thoughts. We were near the end and I was preparing for my final choice. What she means by that is being born. In this study, for the first time, very first time, I found someone who had a clear light experience. That was in Belgium or Holland, and it's in the book. It's translated. I find it difficult to describe that. She also found it difficult to describe. There's something about that light that just everything was clear. Next one. This is Alma. She says, she's 2 years old while she's being raped by a family friend. She's 2 years old. It was during this time that I experienced my first visit to a place not of earth, when my abuser would mount me, covering my nose with his stomach area. I would suffocate and pass out. This went on for a couple of years until Grandma saw it, and out went the man. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this. Where is Alma in the picture? She's up above, isn't she? She's not that body on the mat or on the bed. She's way up above. You find this very often with children. You can also find it with adults. What we call an out-of-body experience, I call a defense mechanism. Any child that is threatened or frightened or in some way afraid for their life or don't know what to do, they will leave their body. Why? Because they're saving themselves. Who's the self? It's not the body on the floor. The self is a soul or a spirit or that self that they really are. They're saving it. So when you flippantly talk about out-of-body experiences, take another look at what's causing that out-of-body experience. It is a defense mechanism to save the self. And here's a picture that shows you that. Heidi. I remember thinking of the Lady of Light as a queen of some kind. You know, that Lady of Light appears in ever so many near-death experiences. Here and in Europe, all over the world, the Lady of Light. In my first book on children, the new children in near-death experiences, there was a child experiencer in France who was bitten by an asp, and she was saved by the Lady of Light. So this Lady of Light is everywhere. I don't know who or what she is, But she's not just an angel. There's something very different and special about the Lady of Light. You know, out of the mouth of babes, I've already talked about that. And this is my way of putting an exclamation point on that figure, on those words. You know, go back to that child when they're older. See how they're handling school. How are they handling being in the family? Challenges faced. These are the three main challenges. Number one, most begin abstracting before the first grade, are smarter than their peers, teachers, I could add the parents, display signs of synesthesia. We'll talk about this as we go along. We've already basically talked about number two, what happens to the innocent within the family unit. So we're talking mom and dad, brothers and sisters. When they go to school, have sex, date, seek jobs, marry, have kids of their own. Abuse issues, drugs and alcohol, the elder years. Number three, they forever miss home. The greater collective they know is real. Many feel lonely or are suicide prone or suicide ideation, not in the sense of grief, but rather homesickness. Here's two experiencers just making statements here. Cindy, growing up was difficult. I always referred to my family as a group of people who did not know each other, and they decided to stay in this house because it provided food, clothing, and shelter. Doesn't that sound like a kid? I never cried. I looked at the soul of people. This is Cindy. She lives in Ecuador. I didn't become suicidal until my sophomore year after 4 moves in different schools. I actually had it all planned out and had taken my parents' gun and put it in my nightstand. Through an intervention that still seems mystical to me, my plan was thwarted. Mrs. Penny. You hear a lot about these little kids and suicide ideation. Let's go on. Typical characteristics afterward. Heightened senses, vivid imagination, intellectual curiosity and drive, psychic, intuitive, loneliness, higher IQ, deep capacity to care, great potential for the ethical path, aware of future moments. I'll just stop there a little minute here and repeat some of the words they told me when they were in school and dating. They knew what was going to happen before it did, so why bother? They didn't go out on dates. They knew what was going to happen. So this idea of being aware of future moments. Strongly independent, even if shy. And many child experiencers are shy. Non-linear development. Okay, let's get into some of this. Let's go to the next one. Synesthesia. So many of them come back with synesthesia. This is, has to do with the limbic system in the brain, your most emotional center. The senses, controls the senses in the body. Very often in a near-death experience, the senses get multiplied or blended. Let me talk a little bit more about synesthesia. Let me give you an example. This is me No, I was not a near-deaf kid, but I was born with synesthesia. In the first grade, I was the only child in school who could smell color, see music, and hear numbers. That's typical of synesthesia. It's blended or multiple senses. So I spent most of the first grade sitting on a tall stool in front of the class, wearing a tall conical head that said "Does" on it, as an example of a bad child who told lies. This situation became so serious that the principal called my mother to the school twice to get me kicked out of school because I was such a bad child. And at the end of the first grade, I knew I was telling the truth. I knew I was telling the truth. So, I decided not to become an adult when I grew up. You can't trust those people. Well, I became a dumb adult anyway. I had to relearn it. But as you can see, that first grade experience set the stage for who I am today and who I always have been. I'll just add a little more to that because those were the days of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and that affected me greatly, bothered me greatly. I came to Twin Falls, Idaho, small town in southern Idaho, on the banks or near the banks of the Snake River, very large river, desert country. But we lost a lot of people in our small town in World War II. We had a lot of people in our town who were in Pearl Harbor. And I had to walk to school maybe 8 or 9 long blocks, like New York City blocks, long blocks. And in those days they gave a gold star decal. Maybe some of you remember this. If anyone in your family died in the war effort, you got this gold star decal, and you put it on your front living room, so that you could tell everybody, someone in your family died in the war effort. So I was walking to school. There was lots and lots and lots of gold stars, houses. There was a walk of death. And I'll never forget this one particular house had 6 new gold stars overnight. And I just stood there and sobbed. Kids know what's going on. I cannot remember a single morning in all of first grade when I didn't have to stop my sobs and shudders just to walk in the door of my classroom. Throughout my growing years in school, I did everything I could not to get 100% on all of my tests. Because if you did, you got a gold star, and a gold star to me meant death. And I didn't want any teacher giving me the sign of death. I could not stand gold until I was in my 50s, could not wear gold until I was in my 70s. It was that deep of a scar. Gold meant death. So just, yeah. A little different when I was a kid. Well, anyway, meanwhile, back at the ranch. Learning reversals. Figures from earlier study.
This might be a good place to break for refreshments.
No, this is not a good place to break. There's more!
Oh, I know, you've got another lot of time, but 3 to 3:30 we usually take a break.
The lady is saying we need to take a breath. The lady is saying we need to stop.
We're on the edge of our seats, so it should be easy to pick up that excitement when we come back.
Okay, before we get into the deep stuff that's going to shock you, go out there and have a break, come back in, and I'm going to lay it on you. Okay, are we ready to go on?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Learning reversals. Oh. Well, the universe is playing with us. Okay. My website is www.pmhatwater.com. On my website.
Oh, wait a minute, I have it?
You have it?
Yeah. Just a second.
Oh, good. Sign up for my free monthly newsletter on my website. You will want to do that if you are curious. My newsletter is only for the curious. You never know what's going to be in it. And I don't either. Okay. Let's go with learning reversals. Mine works different than before, 84%. Significant enhancement of intellect, 68%. Birth to 15 years. Now remember, this is my first study on that. So really, there wasn't hardly any teens or tweens in that figure. They're all under the age of 7. IQ score between 150 to 160, 48%. Under 6, tested that same 150 to 160 genius score, 81%. Are you with me? We're going lower and lower, the younger and younger the child. Birth to 15 months, especially if they had a dark light experience. The score when they are old enough to take the standard IQ test begins at 180 and above. The younger the child, the bigger the jump, especially if they had a dark light experience instead of a bright light experience. The younger the child, the greater the jump in IQ. Only 4 kids had genetic markers which could explain this. My sense of this is that the near-death experience is like a power punch. And it's happening to children where the basic flooring is being laid in the brain for the nervous system, the digestive system, skin sensitivity, and brain use, and mind. So that power punch is hitting when that basic flooring is being laid. And it's just jumping them clear out from normal behavior. And my desire is to interest medical people, scientific people, in researching this in a very hands-on, physical way. There's something happening in the brain when that young, when you're hit by a near-death experience. Okay. Learning differences, drawn to and highly, look at this, drawn to and highly proficient in math, science, history. Let's sift that a little bit. They're not going after becoming a medium or a psychic although many do, but most of them do not. They're not interested in another religion or being more spiritual. They want math, science, and history. And there's a special chapter toward the end of the book on historical cases. You get a lot of this. A lot of these scientists that come from near-death experiences when they were little bitty kids. It's amazing. Professionally employed, hardly any of them. School easier, 34%, harder, 23%. Well, you know, that's understandable. Rejected school discipline, 33%. I don't think these numbers mean much because 43% either blocked out school memories or couldn't recall. So they really weren't interested in school. Let's look at that. Let's look deeper at this. Learning changes. Instead of continuing with concrete learning, which is details, you know, in school, detail after detail after detail, you get harder and harder, you know, as you go up the grades. That's called concrete learning. They move to abstract learning, which is concepts. Often they return immersed in broad conceptual learning styles and are forced to relearn the concrete method as if from scratch. Let me give you an example. 6-year-old boy lives a little bit north of Atlanta, Georgia, first grade. Drowns about halfway through school. When he's finally able to get back to school, folks, what are they reading in the first grade? See, spot, run. Dick and Jane. You kind of with me? This boy comes to school now reading Greek mythology and fully understands it. He goes up to his teacher and says, "Why was the book Robinson Crusoe ever written?" Wow. Teacher had to jerk him out of the first grade. This kind of thing often happens. Let me say to you, what school in the United States of America in the first grade is prepared for a child who can abstract? None. And a lot of them can do it. So you can understand why they have problems in school. Yes. Toddlers who can abstract, they can and they do. And they're bored silly with school. Absolutely bored silly. Typical after effects. Here we get into into the tough stuff. Loss of bonding with parents, 90%. We're talking 397 people. Loss of bonding with parents, 90%. That does not mean they do not love their parents. Many do. But they've lost that bonding with them. They're not that bonded or close to their parents. Many of them don't really, they're not really that interested in their parents because they know more than their parents do. They know what their parents are thinking. Maybe they're scolding their parents in their mind. Many of the siblings of these near-death experiencers will say something like, "Well, I don't know that brother or sister. I think they came from another planet. They don't belong in our family. They're different. Difficult family situation, 62%. Long-lasting marriage, 52% when they're older, but only 31% were happy. Let me talk a little bit about that. The major complaint from the other spouse is that their mate was flirting all the time, or wanting to be around other people all the time, and it bothered them. Well, the average near-death experiencer, adult or child, comes back very loving. You're very, let's just lay it on the line. Every woman you see is your mother, your daughter, your sister, your mother. Every man you see is your uncle, your father, your son. It's not that you can't tell the difference. You know who's who, but you just love them all. And for a spouse who maybe, that may be a little ticklish, it's troublesome. So that can be a little bit difficult. Look, I talk about this a lot with adults. We talk about cosmic love. We talk about unconditional love. We talk about that idea after near-death experience when you're just coming back so loving. Did you ever bother to consider that unconditional love is God's love? Did you ever bother to realize that that kind of love loves everybody, all the time, everywhere? You're loving everybody. Does your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend understand that? You love everybody unconditionally. Speaking of adults, our divorce rate within the first 8 to 10 years is between 77 to 80%. Big, major. And it's because of love. It's because of how we handle love, what our understanding is of love. It's very different. So the children are faced with that too. Empathic, 84%, highly intelligent, 75%, 74% suicide prone or suicide ideation. Let's go to the next one. Let's dig deeper into that one. More typical after effects. Vivid dreams, 70%. Problems sleeping, 67%. Out-of-body experiences, 62%. The paranormal is normal for children. You understand that? That's normal for a kid. Aware of the future, 61%. Turn to drug use, 46%. Turn to alcohol, 45%. That's almost half. Strong spiritual guidance and knowing, 76%. Very successful careers. I had a number of them who became millionaires. Very successful. 64% successful, 64% suicide ideation. We got to look at that. Let's turn the page. We've got to face the unfaceable. PTSD versus NDE, there's a whole chapter on that in the book. After effects of near-death states for the very young can seem very similar to a form of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. 34% in my research base were positive about having had an NDE, 61% were negative. Because growing up and finding their place in life was just too difficult. Let's go a little bit further with that. Next one. Whoops, let's go back. We missed one. Okay, let's just stay there for a while. How do we handle this? Well, let's look at this. To a child, suicide is not bad. Hear this. To a child, they have no concept of hurting their family, causing anybody any grief. Their logic is quite different. They were in this beautiful, loving place with these incredible people when they weren't breathing. Now that they're breathing again, they're out of that place. The people and the place just doesn't match. So for a child, they do that, aha! The way to get back to the beautiful place with the loving people is to stop my breath. It's just that simple. They do not look at it as bad or grief or, they don't look at it that way. They look at it as normal. The older the child, the greater the desire to leave. Few do, because it doesn't feel right, but the desire is still there. This is an 86-year-old woman who still wanted to go back, no matter how or what. Okay, let's go. This disguises the real issue. It's all about home. Guilt for wanting to go back. Betrayal for getting kicked out. Many never knew or understood what a human being is or how to be one. They just didn't fit in. It's just that simple. I want you to hear this. Remember Judy? She was born because her parents wanted a baby to sacrifice on Satan's altar. And she had 17 near-death experiences before the age of 9, the first is 6 weeks. Yes, she went through a lot of problems growing up, dating, finding her place in life, finding a job, finding anybody who would love her, or that she could love them. She went through a lot of problems. She went to therapists, she went to psychologists. She found, for her, the most helpful place to go, the most help that she received was from yoga. It was from yoga. Many of them said they got more help from psychics than psychologists. You might sort of relate to that. This is Judy. All of my experiences in this life whether they appear to be dark or light, are expressions of love. Get that? Experiences of searching for love. I came into this life with a purpose. This was not known to me until much later in my life, or I would not have been able to truly know these experiences as they were in the moment. What I know today has brought everything full circle. She's now in her 50s. Just phenomenal. Remember I said the historical cases? In the book, it teaches you how to look and to define and to recognize historical cases. This is one with Mary Anning, 1799 to 1847. Hit by lightning at 15 months, was sickly, then blossomed, excelled in geology, paleontology, and fossil collecting. Her discoveries placed her on the list of 10 British women who have had the most influence on science. Darwin even read her work. Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. I truly feel that that Edward de Vere is the real Shakespeare. And in the back of Future Memory, I have a special appendices on Edward de Vere. You can, he had 3 near-death experiences. You can trace them all. The book, or the play Hamlet, is his autobiography. Point for point for point for point. Everything that happened to Hamlet happened to Edward de Vere. It's just mind-boggling. Abraham Lincoln, near drowning at 5 years, an NDE at 10 years, another possible one later in life. Developed sudden interest in reading, unusual talents that appeared after his brushes with death, prolific psychic abilities, regular future memory episodes, and accurate visions. Albert Einstein, NDE at 5 from a serious illness, became interested in the invisible power that affected the compass, then later began playing with the violin at 6. His unusual talents and characteristics all trace back to that illness at 5 years of age. Black Elk, NDE at 9 when he left his body and flew into the cloud realms, where his life mission was revealed to him. Later became a medicine man, realizing the Great Spirit was one who healed. Now with Black Elk, he had a startling and long and involved near-death experience. He became a healer, great healer, medicine man in his tribe. At that time in the history of our country, Native Americans were not allowed to have their story put in a book. Wasn't allowed at all, our government. Finally, when Black Elk was very advanced in years, the law was changed so he could have this done. And a white guy volunteered. His name was Neil, I think it was Neil Reinhardt. And Black Elk lived way down a country lane. And when he heard that Neil Reinhardt was coming, you know, he didn't know anything about the man, but he walked up to the beginning of this long path, and Neil was just starting to go down the path, and the two saw each other and hugged, and like long lost friends, because Neil had also had a near-death experience, and the two understood each other from the beginning. This is why the book Black Elk Speaks is so unusual. It's such a unique book. It was written by a near-death experiencer describing another near-death experiencer. They understood each other. Some more recent ones, Edgar Casey didn't have those abilities until the age of 5 after he drowned. And the English actor, Benedict Cumberbatch. This is quite the story. Children tell us there is an ongoing stream of consciousness that past, present, and future are but one continuous reality. That time does not exist, and that consciousness itself moves from one dimension to another in a continuous and forever opportunity for all of us to be the forever angels we already are. Wow. This book has all kinds of stuff in it. The child's version of life. Yes, there's a few that talk about reincarnation and draw pictures, but most of them are familiar with that continuous reality, that continuous stream of consciousness, and every once in a while it'll take a dip, that's a life, comes right back up, flows along, takes another dip, that's another life, flows along. They're not interested in reincarnation. They're not interested in those kind of stories. They're still there on the other side. They know that stream. That stream is real for them. And they know that stream. They know that truth. They know who they are. And they never forget it. Life may be a little kind of scary and hard living, but they never forget who they are. Writing this book has humbled me. It has excited me. It has thrilled me. And it has shown me that every one of us is a God in the making. That we are all stars in that starry sky. We are all of us, forever angels. Thank you. The lady in charge says, are there any questions? Yes, sir.
You know, when they've done studies on babies,
Well,
children,
they've done studies on babies, children,
that the mind of a child,
the mind of a child,
because when they're first born, the way they pick up language,
the way they pick up the language when they're first born.
their minds are the keenest when they're a child.
Yeah,
So
the minds
students-
are keen when they're children
Because it deteriorates as you get older.
because they
But-
deteriorate as they get older.
But that's what happens. But I mean, the new science is saying that that's not true either, but anyway.
Well, your near-death kids tend to get smarter.
But I'm just curious, because you talk about the near-death children and having these very bright minds and high IQs.
Near-death kids, bright minds, high IQs.
But I'm wondering how that compares to the average child
How does that compare to the average
who
child?
doesn't have an in near-death experience. But again, because babies have their sharpest minds, because they're learning and picking up everything, language. all
He's
that.
talking about kids who learn, pick up language very quickly. Today, we are being faced with the new kids. Have you ever had any dealings with teenagers? People in their 20s? Smart! Really smart, intelligent kids. I wrote a book about it called Children of the Fifth World. Yes, we're birthing and raising children today that are not like grandma and granddad, or great-grandma and great-granddad. They're incredible kids. I'm thinking here of the New Thought movement. It began in 1830 or around then, and since then, 1830 on. And I'm not talking about New Age here. This is New Thought. Thoreau and Emerson and with the New Thought. Ever since those early 1800s, we have a stream of consciousness coming in that is just fabulous. And now that stream is picking up speed. I think a lot because of our new electronic gadgets that they play with. But I notice with these new electronic gadgets, they're extremely intelligent. But they're not learning how to feel, and they're not learning how to recognize emotion on people's faces, and they're not learning how to handle hugs and being together with family and friends. The mind is just wow, but the emotions are starving. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but I certainly have. So maybe we can get it together. You're going to be very amazed when I talk about the new kids that are coming in. It's just, yeah, they're coming in thirds. Yes.
In the news this week,
In the news this week?
lot of talk about declining SAT and ACT scores over the last
Declining SAT and scores
last several years.
last several years.
How does that fit in with
Drugs.
Yeah.
Drugs. Yep. We have a lot of drugs. We also have a lot of digital use. We have a lot of things going on that are taking us from our natural heart, our natural feelings, our natural emotions. So of course, intelligence is dropping. And it's going to drop harder and lower if we don't get a hold of this. And of course, drugs is a big one. This new sex stuff is a big one. The new kids coming in are here to redefine sex. And they're getting screwed up doing it. So how do we handle that? Well, maybe as adults we can help them. Maybe there are ways through various types of counseling or teaching or classes that we can help them. I know that yoga can help them. Getting them into various esoteric studies can help them. Just good exercise can help them. And getting back to good diets will make a difference. Yes?
Early on, you spoke about an episode where there was a family member assaulting a young child. And I think maybe, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but would the clinical psychologist say that there was a disassociation with that episode? And what is the evidence that was actually an out-of-body experience as opposed to going somewhere else?
So you're talking about Alma?
Yes.
Yeah. What is the evidence?
Right.
How can you get detective evidence in a scene like that? I can't. I can interview her, I can interview the grandma, I can interview the people involved, I can study them, but I can't give you forensics. But what I can give you is data on 43 years of experience. What I also can do is give you data on the studies that I did long before I died. So, I had 5 fathers and 2 mothers. I was raised by people from Norway. Go figure, in the reclaimed deserts of southern Idaho, I get raised by people from Norway. That's another story. I would not mind at all my biological mother, because I knew she was my daughter and I wasn't about to take orders from my daughter. Whoop. So, there was... So when I was finally an adult and had children of my own, I got into some problems with psychic things, and so I went to an ARE study group. That's Edgar Cayce Association for Research Study Group. Only I didn't know it was a study group. Never heard of Edgar Cayce. And these people were studying Huna on the side. And so they gave me a 44-breath Huna healing prayer. Bolts of lightning entered each palm and filled my body, went up and filled my body. And I was so taken aback and so, woo, that I decided, and I said to them, I don't know who you are, I don't know what you're doing, but whoever you are and whatever you're doing, I want to do it too. So I joined, and that was an ARE study group. So to understand past life regressions, I became I became a hypnotherapist specializing in past life regressions. I did stage work. And after 5 to 6 years of doing this kind of thing with hundreds of people, I decided I knew something about reincarnation. And I wanted to know something about astrology, so I took classes and became a professional astrologer. And after about 5 or 6 years, I could say to you, I know something about astrology. It was never enough for me that I could do something. It was important for me that you could do it. How and why? I wanted to study you and you and you. How many other people can do this? And I would study them. And this went on for a decade. I finally started Idaho's first nonprofit metaphysical corporation by the name of Inner Forum. We dealt with people, easily 3,000 people or more. All kinds of classes, all kinds of experiments, all kinds of studies, and 3 Kundalini breakthroughs. I became a professional ghost dehaunter. I was dehaunting houses, or cemeteries, whatever. You name it, I did it. Put a pen in my hand and tell it to roll over, and it'd roll over. And I decided that was ego work, and I did not like to massage my ego. I did not believe that that's what it was all about. So I can say to you that I've studied this a lot with children and adults. And I'm a cop's kid. I'm often with my dad in the police car. I'm at the police station. I'm studying those people too. I have been studying people and how they respond to whatever all of my life. And in 1977, I had reached that point in my life. Well, actually, in October of 1976, I had reached that point in my life where I decided that I had enough of this. So I wanted to be a bank manager. And I was taking classes from the American Institute of Banking. Yes, I was. I was going to be a bank manager. I was going to be normal like everybody else. I'm going to be a bank manager. And I was raped, became pregnant, and it was the results of the pregnancy miscarriage that caused my deaths. I had the feeling before, that old axiom, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And I felt that I was ready for a new teacher. I got death. I was expecting a person. I got death instead. Wiped the slate clean. But I brought forward that power still. And I can say to you, after my near-death experiences, I became more powerful than I've ever been in my life. I had more energy than I ever had in my life. I was given all of that energy to do this work. I was like an atomic energy reactor. For the first, about the first 12 to 15 years of my work, I worked a 7-day work week, and I would average 12 hours a day. And finally, after that, I decided, well, I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm going to work a 5-day work week, 8 hours a day. Well, actually, I'm doing a 6-day work week, 8 hours a day. But anyway. I do what I do because I was told to do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Leanna.
Yes, I have a question for you. Obviously, when you speak of the children, we know the outcome of all of this. But when you speak about the small children, it's difficult for them to express what happened to them. And the
Yes, it's
near-death
difficult for children to express what
and a
happened to them.
near-death
Yes.
experience. What would you say in your experience of wealth of knowledge that happened to people on their way out and then lived to come back and tell about it? What happened to them and then what happened to them when they came
What
back?
happens to them going out?
Yes, I want to know what happens to somebody.
Well, it's different with different kids. It's different with different people. There's no one way they go out or have feelings about it.
What did they see? How did they
Certainly, you're
feel?
going to get that from reading the book. Some of them, are in other worlds. They're coming back. It's not the typical. Because most of them are still, they're still on the other side. And it's like this earth world is, I really don't know how to answer you. Because it's so different with the different kids. Some of them come back and see demons. Yes, they do. Some of them come back and see angels. Yes, they do. Some of them come back knowing where they were and where they now are and how to handle it. And some of them come back completely lost. So, I really don't know how to answer your question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
I am a childhood near-death experiencer, so I can at least give you one direct experience.
Oh, good.
And
I wish there were a microphone.
I'll be loud. Can you all hear me?
No. Is there a microphone? Could you give your microphone to her?
I'm so loud, they'll find it, and I'm going to tell it to you. All right. So I had just turned 6 years old and had meningitis. That's the reason. And in the experience, I remember the pain of meningitis. And then I found myself with a vantage point at the top of the room. And in that place, I found myself completely enveloped by, for me, endurance. It was God. It could be love. It could be that all-embracing oneness of us all. I found myself in that and said, my goodness, this is where I came from. This is who I am. It's amazing. I'm neither a boy nor a girl nor a grown-up nor a child. I am my soul.
Yeah.
And I knew it in that moment. And I knew that I was that soul I'd be if I remembered myself while I was here. And that I'd be that soul that I would be when I went back home. When she talks about homesickness or death. And then I looked down and saw the little girl and realized, but there was just this second where I realized, oh, that's gotta be me. And I was back in my body. I never forgot that experience for a moment. I've always thought of that as reality. I thought, do I want to tell my parents about this? And I thought, I just turned 6, but I said, they cannot handle it. And the actual language I said to myself, they're going to try to fix me. And I know I don't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
So for the rest of my life, that's been a presence, a way of me. And as time went on, I learned how you're supposed to act, like in school and getting professions. And because I could understand it, I was highly successful. I mean, I had the IQ they talk about, and I became a doctor and all kinds of stuff. I always knew the other side. And now I'm 75. I'm past all that stuff of trying to fit in, trying to put on a cover to look like everybody else. Now I get to love you. And it's the time of being just who I am, which is definitely that soul from the other side. And I never forgot it. So that's one childhood near-death experience.
Pam's case is typical. Thank you, Pam. You said it better than anybody else could. Yes.
Your point that you made with children lost bonding with their parents. They know what they are thinking, you said. Is that sense of knowing what the parents are thinking similar to knowing what other thoughts that identical twins have?
Very similar. Very similar. Most of them know what their parents are thinking. Yeah, they do. But identical twins, certainly. And what is interesting to me is one is born, the other one dies, but they go on knowing each other, many times having a life together. Think of Elvis Presley. His twin died, but yet Elvis and his twin, throughout his life, he had a relationship with his twin.
So they develop an ESP sense than what the normal person is aware of.
They often develop together, so I don't know what else to say. I have a person over here having a fit. Maybe she can add to that.
I wish I could add to that, but no. My question to you is, you mentioned that the children coming in are only going to be a third. What did you mean?
I didn't get it. I didn't, yeah. Thirds and thirds and thirds, Children of the fifth world, about a third of the new kids that are coming in are really, really intelligent. They've got, as near as we can tell, both of those genes that not just build a better brain, but have enhancements in brain use. About a third, about another third are very creative, very interested in life, or at least being part of life and, very much into life. What we would call normal kids, but more than normal, really bright kids. And we've got another third that are either sociopaths or psychopaths. We're getting both. The really brilliant kids and the really tricky kids. So, yeah, if you want to fully get into the new kids, get the book Children of the Fifth World. I can't discuss that here because, you know, you're opening up a whole new door that would take me another 3 hours. I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that right now. Sorry. Whew. Yes.
Can you talk about the implications for education? Because you're a teacher
Yeah, the
in
implications for education.
a classroom, and you've got everything that's presenting itself, and many people aren't even aware that it could be something beyond.
Well, our educational program right now is really strange. So I'm not going to get into the politics of that.
How best to address
Sometimes your other types of schools are very helpful in handling the new kids. I don't know. I can't speak off the top of my mind about these other types of schools, like what is it, Rudolph?
Steiner.
Yeah. There are other types of schooling that can help out. Folks, I'm starting to run down. My tongue is getting lost in my mouth, and I'm not able to talk too well.